They say life can change in an instant, but nobody ever tells you how fast that instant can come. One day you're working hard, paying bills, dreaming of a better tomorrow. And the next, you're sitting on a park bench, holding everything you own in one old backpack. On a cold morning in the heart of downtown Chicago, a woman sits quietly on that bench. Her name is Rachel Miller. Once upon a time, Rachel had a job, a home, and a teenage daughter she adored more than anything. But today, the world passes her by. Strangers rush to work, parents walk their kids to school, baristas serve lattes to customers who never look her way. Rachel doesn't beg. She doesn't shout. She just watches, tired but not defeated. Her fingers clutch an old photograph, a picture of her and her daughter, laughing at a carnival from years ago. That small photo is her lifeline, a reminder of who she was, and who she still hopes to be again. It wasn't always like this. Just a year ago, Rachel worked at a small marketing firm. She was good at what she did, creative, organized, always the one people came to for help. Her coworkers liked her, her boss respected her. She'd leave the office each evening, drive home to a small rented apartment, and call out, "Sophia, I'm home." Her daughter would run into her arms, chattering about school and life. They didn't have much, but they had each other. And that was enough. But life doesn't always warn us before it takes a turn. When the company hit a rough patch, layoffs began. Rachel, being one of the newer hires, was let go without severance. She tried to stay calm, told herself she'd find another job in no time. She applied everywhere, called old colleagues, updated her resume. But months went by, and no one called back. Bills piled up. The rent went overdue. Her landlord, impatient and cold, knocked one night and said, "You've got till Friday, Rachel. After that, I'm changing the locks." Rachel pleaded, begged for a little more time, but he didn't care. By the end of that week, she and her daughter were standing on the sidewalk with their belongings in boxes. No friends came to help. No family stepped in. And when social services learned she couldn't provide stable housing, they made a painful decision. They took Sophia into temporary custody. Rachel's heart broke that day. Not because she lost her home, but because she lost the one person she was fighting for. That night, she slept on a park bench for the first time. The cold air bit through her jacket, but the emptiness inside her hurt far worse. Still, as she lay there staring up at the stars, she whispered to herself, "I'll get her back. No matter how long it takes. I'll get my baby back." Days turned into weeks. Weeks into months. And little by little, the world stopped seeing Rachel. People walked past her as if she were invisible. She stopped checking her reflection in store windows because the woman looking back didn't feel like her anymore. Her hair tangled, her clothes worn thin, but her eyes still carried a quiet fire. Every morning, Rachel would pack her few belongings, a blanket, a worn-out notebook, that photo of Sophia, and move before the police came to clear the park. She'd wander the streets, sometimes humming old songs to herself, trying to drown out the noise of the city and the noise in her head. And even when hunger clawed at her stomach, she refused to beg. She told herself she wouldn't let this world turn her into someone bitter. But sometimes, kindness is hard to hold on to when life keeps taking. One evening, as the clouds opened and rain poured down, Rachel sat under a small awning behind a closed store. She pulled her knees to her chest, shivering. Her backpack was soaked. The photo inside was getting wet. She tried to protect it, whispering softly, "Don't you dare fade away on me, Sophia." Tears mixed with the rain, and for the first time in weeks, Rachel broke down. She sobbed quietly, afraid someone might see her, afraid someone might look at her the way people look at broken things. But she didn't know that this wasn't the end of her story. It was just the beginning. Because sometimes, when you've lost everything, life starts rebuilding you, piece by piece, in ways you never expected. And as Rachel wiped her tears and stood up the next morning, she whispered to herself, "I'm still here, and I'm not done yet." But surviving on the streets is harder than Rachel ever imagined. Cold nights, cruel strangers, and painful memories will test every ounce of her strength. And soon, she'll face a choice that will reveal just what kind of woman she truly is. Stay with me, Because Rachel's story is about to show us that even when life beats you down, the human spirit can still stand tall. The nights were the hardest. When the city went quiet and the cold crept in, Rachel would curl beneath an old blanket, her back pressed against a brick wall, praying that sleep would come before the fear did. Sirens echoed in the distance. Somewhere, someone shouted. Somewhere else, laughter, the kind she hadn't heard in months. Every morning, she'd wake before dawn, before the sun could expose her reality to the world. She'd brush off her jacket, run her fingers through her tangled hair, and whisper, "I'm okay," even when she wasn't. It was her daily armor, pretending to be fine when everything inside her was breaking. Days blurred into one another. Some people dropped coins in her cup without looking up. Others crossed the street to avoid her. A few threw words sharper than knives: "Get a job. Stop being lazy." She probably did it to herself. Each comment cut deep, but Rachel never responded. She knew anger wouldn't change their hearts, and it wouldn't bring her daughter back. She learned where to find food: church kitchens, shelters, the kind cashier who slipped her a sandwich when the manager wasn't watching. But pride kept her from asking for too much. She didn't want pity. She wanted a chance. One afternoon, she stood near a cafe window, staring at a display of fresh pastries. Her stomach growled, but her pockets were empty. Inside, a young man finished eating, gathered his things, and left his plate half full. When he dropped it in the trash, Rachel took a hesitant step forward. "Excuse me," she said softly, her voice cracking from dryness. "Would you mind if I—" The man looked at her like she was something beneath him. He turned away without a word, muttering under his breath as he walked off. Rachel looked down at the trash can, then back at the cafe window, and quietly whispered to herself, "One day, I'll eat at a table again. Not from the trash." That night, she sat beside an older man under a bridge, a veteran named James. He had a kind face, worn by years of struggle. He noticed her empty hands and split his bread in half, offering her a piece. Rachel shook her head. "You keep it," she said. He smiled faintly. "I've had worse nights. You need it more than I do." Something shifted in her that night. Even when she had nothing, she realized she still had something to give: kindness. And so, she began sharing what little she had: her blanket on freezing nights, a kind word to a woman crying in the alley, a story to a runaway teenager who'd lost hope. Soon the others began to notice. They started calling her Miss Rachel, as if she were someone important, someone who mattered. And for the first time in months, she felt human again. Still, survival was far from easy. There were nights when hunger gnawed at her until she could barely stand. Mornings when she woke up sick, drenched in rainwater, her body trembling from exhaustion. And every single day, she thought of Sophia. She imagined her daughter at school, laughing with friends, maybe wondering where her mom was. Rachel wrote letters to her on scraps of paper, even though she had no address to send them to. It was her way of keeping hope alive. Weeks passed. Winter turned cruel. The wind bit through her coat like it had a personal vendetta. But she kept going, because she had made herself a promise. One morning, while sitting near the subway entrance, she noticed a commotion nearby. Someone had dropped a wallet. She bent down, picked it up, and looked around. No one was there. She opened it, a thick stack of bills, credit cards, a driver's license. The name read Clara Jensen. People around her noticed. A man beside her whispered, "You're lucky. Keep it." Another woman said, "You could buy food for weeks with that. Don't be stupid." Rachel stared at the money, her hands trembling. For the first time in months, she could eat properly. She could maybe even get a cheap motel for a night. No one would ever know. But then her eyes fell on the photo inside the wallet. A picture of Clara with her 2 young kids. A mother, a family, and suddenly, Rachel thought of Sophia. She imagined what she would say if her daughter asked, "Mom, what did you do when no one was watching?" Rachel took a deep breath, zipped up her coat, and began to walk. She ignored the voices telling her to keep it, ignored the temptation that screamed louder with every step. She walked for over an hour until she found the nearest police station. When she stepped inside, the officer behind the counter looked up in surprise. "I found this," she said, placing the wallet on the desk. The officer blinked, then nodded slowly. Thank you, not many people would have done that. As Rachel turned to leave, a voice called from behind her. Wait, please. She turned and saw a woman running toward her, neatly dressed, eyes wide with disbelief. It was Clara, the wallet's owner. She rushed forward, tears in her eyes. You brought this back? Oh my God, thank you. You have no idea what this means to me. Rachel just smiled faintly. It was yours. I figured you might need it. Clara looked at her, really looked at her, and something in her face softened. You're homeless, aren't you? She asked gently. Rachel hesitated, then nodded. Clara reached into her purse, pulling out a business card. Please, come by this address tomorrow. I run a small community center. I'd like to talk to you. Rachel's lips parted in disbelief. Why? Because, Clara said, smiling warmly, people like you, people who do the right thing even when life's unfair, deserve another chance. As Clara walked away, Rachel stood frozen on the sidewalk, holding that small card like it was the most precious thing in the world. For the first time in a long time, her heart beat with something unfamiliar, hope. She looked up at the sky, and for a brief moment she smiled. Maybe this was the moment everything could start to change. But she had no idea. This one act of honesty would set in motion a chain of events that would challenge her more than she ever imagined. Because when life finally starts giving back, it sometimes asks, just how much more can you give? The next morning, Rachel woke before the sun rose, her hands cold, her heart racing. All night, she'd held onto that small business card like it was a ticket back to her old life. The edges were slightly bent, the ink smudged from her fingertips, but the name printed on it still shone clearly. Clara Jensen, Director, the Haven Community Center. She didn't know what to expect. Part of her wanted to believe this could be a fresh start. But another part whispered that maybe it was too good to be true. People had offered help before, and disappeared when they saw how broken her life really was. Still, Rachel couldn't ignore the feeling in her gut. Something told her she had to go. So, after washing her face in a gas station restroom and tying her hair back with a piece of string, she began walking toward the address on the card. The city was waking up around her, coffee shops opening, buses roaring by, people hurrying to jobs she used to dream about. As she walked, she caught her reflection in a window. Her clothes were worn, her face thinner, but her eyes looked alive again. When she finally reached the building, she stopped in her tracks. The Haven Community Center wasn't much, just a 2-story brick structure with a faded mural of children holding hands painted on the side. But to Rachel, it looked like hope itself. Inside, the air smelled of coffee and cleaning supplies. Volunteers bustled around setting up tables, handing out breakfast plates to a small line of people in need. For a moment, Rachel hesitated by the door. She almost turned back. Then Clara appeared, smiling as if she'd been expecting her all along. You came, Clara said warmly, stepping forward. Rachel nodded shyly. I wasn't sure if you meant it. I always mean it, Clara replied. Come on. Let's talk. They sat in a small office that felt strangely safe, soft light, a family photo on the desk, the faint hum of conversation outside. Clara offered her a cup of coffee. Rachel hesitated, then accepted. The warmth against her palms made her eyes sting with emotion. So tell me, Clara began gently, what happened? Rachel hesitated, unsure where to start. But something about Clara's kindness opened the floodgates. She told her everything. The layoff, the eviction, losing custody of her daughter, the nights on the streets, the wallet. By the time she finished, tears had already made a path down her cheeks. I'm sorry, she whispered. I didn't mean to unload all that. Clara reached across the desk, her eyes filled with empathy. Don't apologize. You've been carrying this alone for too long. She took a breath, then said softly, how would you feel about helping out here? Just a few hours a day, cleaning, organizing, serving food. I can't pay much, but it's honest work. I could use someone like you. Rachel blinked in disbelief. You'd really trust me to work here? I trust good people, Clara replied. And returning that wallet told me everything I need to know about who you are. For a moment, Rachel couldn't speak. Her throat tightened and she looked down, whispering, "Thank you. You have no idea what this means." "Oh, I think I do," Clara said softly. That day, Rachel started her new job. It wasn't glamorous, sweeping floors, wiping tables, sorting donations, but every small task felt sacred. For the first time in months, she wasn't invisible. People greeted her, smiled at her, called her by name. She earned her meals with dignity and went to bed that night in one of the shelter's small dorm rooms, not a park bench. As she lay under a real blanket, she whispered to herself, "Sophia, Mommy's getting closer." Days turned into weeks, and Rachel proved herself to be dependable and kind. When others complained, she worked quietly. When someone was rude, she stayed patient. And when no one else volunteered to clean after closing, she stayed behind without being asked. Clara noticed. One evening, as the sun set through the center's tall windows, she approached Rachel and said, "You know, you remind me of myself when I started this place." Rachel laughed softly. "Homeless?" "No," Clara said, smiling. "But lost. My husband died when I was young. I had 2 kids and no idea what to do. People helped me get back on my feet, so now I try to do the same for others." Rachel nodded slowly. "That's beautiful." "It's life," Clara said simply. "Sometimes pain gives us purpose." Rachel thought about those words long after Clara left for the evening. Maybe her pain had a purpose too. Maybe this wasn't just about survival anymore. Maybe it was about rebuilding. As the weeks went by, Rachel started saving a small part of her paycheck in an envelope hidden under her mattress. Every dollar was a step closer to something bigger, maybe a tiny apartment, maybe even the chance to prove she could be stable enough to bring Sophia home. But life, as always, has its tests. And one cold evening, as Rachel was locking up the center after everyone had gone, she heard a faint knock on the door. When she opened it, she found a young girl, shivering, drenched from the rain, clutching a torn backpack. "Please," the girl whispered. "They told me this place helps people." Rachel stared at her, the desperation in her eyes, the fear, the hunger. It was like looking in a mirror from a year ago. She stepped aside and said softly, "Come in, sweetheart. You're safe here." As she closed the door behind them, something inside Rachel shifted. She realized her story wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about becoming the kind of person she once needed when she had nothing. But what Rachel didn't know was that this act of kindness, opening that door, would lead to something far greater than she could have ever imagined. Because sometimes, when you finally open your heart to help others, that's when life decides it's time to heal yours. The girl's name was Lily, 14 years old. Scared, quiet, and too thin for her age. She'd been living on the streets for a week after running away from home. Rachel gave her a towel, a warm meal, and a bunk for the night. She sat beside her until she fell asleep, watching the way the girl's breathing softened, and in that moment, it was like watching her own daughter all over again. That night, Rachel barely slept. Every sound reminded her of Sophia, her laughter, her tears, her voice calling. The guilt came rushing back. But this time, it didn't paralyze her. It pushed her to fight harder. In the morning, she went to Clara's office and asked, "Do you know how I could start the process of getting my daughter back?" Clara looked up, surprised, then smiled softly. "I was wondering when you'd ask that." They sat down together, and Clara walked her through everything. The paperwork, the therapy sessions, the housing requirement, the financial stability proof. It was a mountain of work, but Rachel didn't flinch. She nodded at every step and said, "I'll do it. Whatever it takes." From that day on, Rachel's life became a climb. She worked harder than ever. Cleaning during the day, volunteering in the evenings, attending therapy sessions twice a week, saving every spare dollar she could. The staff at the Haven began to notice her dedication. Some called her an inspiration. But to Rachel, she was just a mother trying to find her way back home. Slowly, things began to shift. Clara helped her apply for a small apartment in a subsidized housing program. It wasn't much, a single room, chipped paint, and creaky floors, but to Rachel, it felt like a palace. She walked in with tears in her eyes, whispering, "We're almost there, baby. Almost." That night, she slept on the floor because she couldn't afford a bed yet. But she didn't care. She had walls, a lock, a key, and for the first time in years, a door she could truly call her own. At work, she became more than just an employee. She started organizing events, mentoring newcomers, helping others write resumes or apply for jobs. People trusted her. They looked up to her. Even Clara noticed the change. One afternoon, she called Rachel into her office. "I have something for you," she said, handing her an envelope. Inside was a letter, an offer to become a full-time staff member at the center, with benefits and a small raise. Rachel's hands trembled as she read it. "You're serious?" "Dead serious," Clara replied, smiling. "You've earned this, Rachel. You've changed this place, and yourself." Rachel laughed through her tears. "I don't even know how to thank you." Clara shook her head. "Just keep doing what you're doing. That's thanks enough." With her new job, Rachel began preparing for the next step, petitioning for custody. She met with her caseworker, Ms. Evans, who remembered her from before. "You look different," Ms. Evans said. "Happier." Rachel smiled softly. "I am. I have a home now. A job. I'm ready to be her mom again." Ms. Evans nodded. "Let's start the process." Weeks turned into months. The paperwork dragged on, but Rachel never lost faith. Every morning she'd wake early, look at the photo of Sophia on her dresser, and say, "One more day closer." And then, after nearly 2 years, the call came. Ms. Evans' voice was warm but cautious. "Sophia's been living with a foster family, but she's asked to see you." Rachel froze, the world around her going still. Her hands shook. "She wants to see me?" "She does," Ms. Evans said gently. "If you're ready, we can arrange a visit." The next few days were a blur. Rachel cleaned her tiny apartment twice over, bought flowers, and borrowed a proper dress from Clara. When the day finally arrived, she sat in the small visitation room, her heart pounding so hard it hurt. And then the door opened. Sophia walked in, taller now, older, her hair pulled into a messy ponytail. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Sophia's eyes filled with tears. "Mom," she whispered. Rachel stood up slowly, her voice trembling. "Hey, baby." They met halfway, and in that moment, years of pain dissolved into one long, trembling embrace. Sophia sobbed into her mother's shoulder. "You promised you'd come back." Rachel held her tighter. "And I did. I never stopped trying, sweetheart." They talked for hours. About everything and nothing. School, memories, the hard days, the good days. Sophia told her she'd been angry for a long time, but deep down, she never stopped believing her mom would find a way back. And Rachel promised she'd never let her go again. When Sophia left that day, Rachel sat for a long time afterward, her face buried in her hands. Not out of sadness, but out of gratitude. Because for the first time in forever, hope wasn't just an idea. It was real. It was here. But life wasn't done with Rachel yet. Because healing doesn't end when you finally stand up. It begins when you start helping others do the same. And soon, she'd discover that her second chance had a greater purpose than she ever imagined. 2 years later, the morning sun spilled gently through the tall windows of the Haven Community Center. The same walls that had once echoed with Rachel's sweeping broom now carried the sound of her confident voice. She stood in front of a small group of women, young mothers, recovering addicts, runaway teens, leading a workshop titled, "Starting Over." Her clothes were simple but neat. Her hair pulled back. A small gold necklace, a gift from Sophia, rested at her collarbone. It said one word, hope. Rachel smiled as she looked at the women sitting before her, their faces uncertain, their eyes tired, just like hers once were. "I know what it feels like," she said softly. "To lose everything. To wake up one morning and realize the world doesn't see you anymore." She paused, her voice trembling slightly. "But you're not invisible. You're not broken. You're just in the middle of your story. And the middle isn't the end." The room was quiet. Some nodded, some wiped away tears. They believed her, because she wasn't speaking theory. She was speaking truth. After the session, Rachel walked out into the hallway, where Clara was waiting. She looked at her with a proud smile. "You're a natural, you know that?" Rachel laughed softly. "You think so?" Clara nodded. "You don't just help people, Rachel. You remind them who they are." Rachel smiled, glancing at the photo on the wall, a framed picture of the Haven team. Her own face among them now. "I guess I learned from the best," she said, and Clara pulled her into a hug. Later that afternoon, as the day wound down, Rachel found herself alone in the office, reviewing paperwork. The building was quiet, just the soft hum of the heater and the distant chatter from the community kitchen. Then she heard it, a hesitant knock on the door. When she looked up, she saw a young woman standing in the doorway. Early 20s. Nervous. Her clothes worn, eyes red from crying. She clutched a small plastic bag that clearly held everything she owned. "Hi," the woman said softly. "They told me to come here, that you might be able to help." Rachel stood, her heart tightening. "Of course," she said gently. "Come in, sweetheart. You don't have to fight alone anymore." The woman stepped inside, tears brimming in her eyes. Rachel offered her a chair and a warm cup of coffee. And as the woman began to speak, her story spilling out in shaky, broken sentences, Rachel listened, every word sinking deep into her heart. Because she understood. Every fear. Every mistake. Every moment of shame. She had lived it. By the time the woman finished, she was crying openly. Rachel reached across the table, took her hand and said softly, "You're not the only one who's been here. I was you once." The woman looked up, startled. "You?" Rachel nodded. "I lost everything once too. My job. My home. Even my daughter. But life has a way of giving back when you refuse to stop believing you deserve better." The woman's tears turned into a trembling smile. Rachel squeezed her hand gently. "You're safe now. And you're not alone." Outside, the afternoon light began to fade, painting the sky in soft golds and pinks. Rachel stood by the window, watching the street fill with life. Kids on bicycles, people walking dogs, cars passing by. Somewhere out there, her daughter Sophia would be getting off the school bus, coming home to a life that once felt impossible. She smiled. Her heart felt full in a way words couldn't capture. Because now, she wasn't just surviving. She was living. She had become what she once needed, a hand reaching back to pull someone else out of the dark. Later that evening, Sophia came by the center, backpack slung over her shoulder. "Mom, can we go get ice cream?" she asked, grinning. Rachel laughed. "Ice cream before dinner? You trying to get me in trouble?" Sophia smirked. "Come on, you work too much." Rachel put on her coat, locking the door behind them. "You're right," she said, smiling. "Let's go." They walked together down the street, hand in hand, the neon lights flickering on one by one. People passed them without knowing, without realizing the story walking right beside them. A woman who had once been invisible, forgotten, broken. Now helping others find themselves again. As they turned the corner, Rachel looked up at the night sky, the city lights glowing above her. And in that quiet moment, she whispered to herself, "Thank you for not letting me give up." Her journey had come full circle. From loss to love. From despair to purpose. She had learned that even when life strips away everything you own, it can never take what truly matters: your heart, your integrity, your faith. And sometimes, when you refuse to be broken, life bends just enough to let the light back in. Moral of this story. In the end, Rachel's story reminds us that rock bottom isn't the end, it's the beginning of the climb. No matter how far we fall, the strength to rise again is already inside us, waiting for the smallest act of kindness, the quietest voice that says, "Keep going." Because sometimes the world doesn't change all at once. Sometimes it changes one heart at a time, one person who refuses to be broken, and instead becomes the reason someone else finds hope. If Rachel's story touched your heart, don't let it end here. Hit that subscribe button for more real, emotional stories that remind us what it means to be human. And if you believe in second chances, share this video with someone who might need to hear that hope is still out there, waiting for them. Because no matter where life takes you, You're never too lost to start again. And remember, we're not just telling stories. We're changing lives.